Welcome back, everybody, to Watcher of All Things. My name is Kiki, and this is my podcast where I talk movies, TV shows, and all things entertainment. And today, it's another horror-filled episode 58, where we are reviewing The Monkey. If you're a fan of the show, you know how much I loved Longlegs last year, so I've been very much looking forward to Osgood Perkins' follow-up film. Lots of thoughts on it. I saw it yesterday. I've had some time to sit and contemplate, but before we get to that today, I hope you're doing well. What a time it's been since last episode. My God, I recorded Saturday last week and we were like just starting to get a blizzard, or Friday maybe, and we literally got almost half a meter of snow last weekend. It was just nuts in Ontario. So I'm very happy that we're getting some better weather. It's been a pretty good week as well. I've been watching lots of stuff that, of course, we will cover in What Else I Watched. I also finished a comic book series that I will talk about today, and some TV show stuff that I really enjoyed. We had the finale of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. All that good stuff will come at the end of the show in the What Else I Watched segment. Before that, of course, tons of news to talk about, including a major franchise that I've been a lifelong fan of that we're going to talk about. But also, I've been working on my YouTube video this week, which will be coming out, I want to say Wednesday the 27th, I think. And of course, it is my 2025 Oscar hopes and predictions. It's going to be very fun, lots to talk about in there. So I'm giving you who I hope will win versus who I think will actually win. But there's also lots of good stuff on the social medias. I just posted a Oscar catch-up video, a review of The Gorge, which I think we'll talk about today as well. Before that, two things. If you live in Ontario, if you are a listener in Ontario, it is our provincial election this week. Please make sure you are registered to vote. Use your vote. It's an important thing. And second thing, timestamps below. If you don't want The Monkey spoiled for you because you're going to see it in theaters, you can listen to the nice news section, then the What Else I Watched section, or if you're okay with just the non-spoiler section, I keep it very spoiler-free, I promise, so you can enjoy all that good stuff, but timestamps below. Before we get into The Monkey, though, let's jump right into the news. All right, first big piece of news this week comes from Deadline, who are reporting that Daniel Craig is out as star of Luca Guadagnino's Sergeant Rock at DC Studios, which, weirdly enough, just this morning, there was a photo posted of Luca Guadagnino, and he is in a DC Studios hoodie. So Sergeant Rock is like fully happening. I think it's going to be announced on Monday, the day this is releasing. Apparently, there's some DC Studios Monday press conference thing that will be happening, so you'll know better than me because I have no clue. I mean, James Gunn just posted a picture with Zack Snyder yesterday that apparently they were just catching up and it's nothing official. But of course, people are going to stoke the flames and be like, oh my God, Zack Snyder's coming back. And I don't know, maybe he is going to direct like The Authority, or it was just two friends catching up because they've been friends for like 25 years. But more importantly, Luca Guadagnino, he is definitely doing Sergeant Rock. He's been captured in a photo wearing a DC Studios hoodie. Like, I don't think he would just wear that if he's not going to do a film. But apparently it's not going to star Daniel Craig. So Deadline says Daniel Craig has exited Sergeant Rock, DC's World War II themed superhero film that would have marked a reteam with director Luca Guadagnino on the heels of A24's Queer. Now, there were some rumors this week that he dropped out because he was disappointed in how Queer did at the box office, but also how it did during award season, and financially it just didn't live up to his expectations. I'm not sure if that's true or if he just feels he's too old for the role and doesn't feel like jumping into the comic book universe. There were rumors from, I think not Deadline, but maybe Variety, that Jeremy Allen White is actually in the running to play Sergeant Rock. I think he would be a very good choice. He's a good actor. He's very intense in The Bear. I think that would be perfect in a military film. So it is a mix of bad news because I'm a huge fan of Daniel Craig. I love his work. He is probably my favorite James Bond other than Sean Connery, but I think this project can still really be great. I'm not that bummed, and I don't think it's like the end of the world. Luca's worked with tons of actors, and most of his projects are extremely good no matter who the cast is. I'm still very optimistic. If I were to wager a guess, I would say the Monday announcement might just be a Sergeant Rock announcement, or there's another DC Studios announcement that we're going to talk about today in the news. So I don't know. I'm sad Daniel Craig won't be in it. I think he could have really brought like a legitimate powerhouse actor vibe to the role. He is a fantastic established actor, and I think it would have kind of turned heads that like, oh wow, they got Daniel Craig for a DC movie. That's a big deal. But I think you do already kind of have that with Luca being on board. Like, that is an auteur filmmaker who makes these very unique films, who's decided, you know what, I think I have a story to tell and I would love to jump into the comic book universe. That's kind of what DC Studios is doing right now. I'd say they're getting interesting storytellers, they're getting interesting directors and interesting actors. Like, they cast a pretty unknown or less known guy for Superman. I think they're willing to take these big risks, and getting Luca for a Sergeant Rock film is already a huge get, and I hope it works. I really hope it works. I think it's interesting how many projects he has on the go. Like, my dear God, he's just finished. He's a very busy guy, and apparently Sergeant Rock will film this summer. I'm really excited for it. I mean, Sergeant Rock showed up briefly in Creature Commando, so it could be a very fun story from what we saw in that episode. I think G.I. Robot might be in it. You know, it's not the end of the world. If it is Jeremy Allen White, I think that's a very good pick. Like I said, he's amazing in The Bear. He's very dramatic. He's very intense. I think he could pull it off. But let's move into the next piece of news, which also features a bit of Daniel Craig. Or speaking of Daniel Craig, the last franchise has fallen. Last week, I told you guys, yes, the James Bond franchise has been with my family and I my whole life. We have always been big fans of the Bond franchise. Even the worst movies we still watch over and over again, like The World Is Not Enough or Die Another Day. Well, James Bond, shocker. This is coming from Variety. It's been confirmed by the sources themselves. Amazon MGM gains creative control of 007 franchise as producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson step back. This is actually kind of devastating, and get ready for 1,000 James Bond TV shows, a movie every 2 years. This comes from the article. Amazon MGM Studios, Wilson and Broccoli have formed a new joint venture to house the James Bond intellectual property rights. The three parties will remain co-owners of the iconic franchise, but Amazon MGM will have creative control. And this is a quote coming from Mike Hopkins, who is the head of Prime Video and Amazon MGM Studios. Quote, since his theatrical introduction over 60 years ago, James Bond has been one of the most iconic characters in filmed entertainment. We are grateful to the late Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman for bringing James Bond to movie theaters and the world, and to Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli for their unyielding dedication and their role in continuing the legacy of the franchise that is cherished by legions of fans worldwide. We are honored to continue this treasured heritage and look forward to ushering in the next phase of the legendary 007 for audiences around the world. To which Wilson commented, with my 007 career spanning nearly 60 incredible years, I am stepping back from producing the James Bond films to focus on art and charitable projects. Therefore, Barbara and I agree it is time for our trusted partner, Amazon MGM Studios, to lead James Bond into the future. Broccoli then commented, my life has been dedicated to maintaining and building upon the extraordinary legacy that was handed to Michael and me by our father, producer Cubby Broccoli. I've had the honor of working closely with 4 of the tremendously talented actors who have played 007 and thousands of wonderful artists within the industry. With the conclusion of No Time to Die and Michael retiring from the films, I feel it is time to focus on my other projects. So in 2022, Amazon actually bought MGM for $8.5 billion, acquiring a huge catalog of more than 4,000 films and 17,000 TV shows, alongside the rights to distribute all of the Bond films. For those who don't know, Barbara Broccoli has actually been very important to the Bond franchise. Like, she was a huge advocate for getting Daniel Craig for the role, and she's amazing. She's actually done very well steering the franchise, and Amazon was wanting to take really shitty steps with the franchise, and that's where there's been this huge disagreement since No Time to Die of what to do with the franchise. Apparently, Aaron Taylor Johnson has been very much in the running, and there's been constant negotiations and talks with him. But as for like spin-offs and stuff like that, Amazon was very willing to do that, but Barbara was the one, I believe, that said there's no chance of that happening. I do not want that to happen. So that's why we're getting this. I think they've realized that every negotiation, every movie, every TV show, every year with the Bond franchise is just going to be like pulling nails. It's going to be bickering, arguing, and they have other projects they want to focus on, so they've decided to hand it over. And I get it, you know? It is what it is. The online reaction to this was quite sad this week. I think a lot of people like myself were realizing, holy shit, like the Bond franchise is over. Because think about it, the Bond franchise is maybe the last prestige franchise that hasn't been bought by a big corporation, fully under control by like Disney or Warner Brothers, and is just being milked with spin-off shows and other franchises that are crossing over and stuff like that. James Bond, even if you're not a fan, everyone knows the name James Bond, 007. The franchise still has so much prestige to its name, but now, watch, it's like Jeff Bezos has already been crowdsourcing who he thinks Bond should be, so I guarantee it's just going to be Henry Cavill. It's going to be a shitty movie because, in my opinion, Henry Cavill is not a great actor. I think he's actually not that good. He's been in one good movie for me, and that was Fallout. I think he's not a good actor in most of his Superman stuff. So it's disappointing. And Daniel Craig did have a comment on the matter. He reacted saying, "My respect, admiration, and love for Barbara and Michael remain constant and undiminished. I wish Michael a long, relaxing, and well-deserved retirement. Whatever ventures Barbara goes on to do, I know they will be spectacular, and I hope I can be part of them." So only positive things from him to say. There were stories every year about how much Daniel Craig hated being James Bond, how much he hated the franchise, but watch that final speech of his on the set of No Time to Die, and you can tell that is a man who is very sad to be saying goodbye to a franchise, to be saying goodbye to mostly a crew that he's worked on with every film. Like, he worked through the writer's strike on Quantum of Solace. He was Bond for almost 20 years, nearly 20 years, like 18 years. So Bond has been a huge part of his career. Of course, he's a lot of people's favorite James Bond. I grew up with him as my Bond. He's been the Bond most of my life. Like, when I was born, it was Pierce Brosnan, very briefly, and then it was Craig, and I loved Craig. I loved Daniel Craig. At the start, I liked Casino Royale, then the rest of the films. For a few years, I kind of distanced myself. I was like, I don't know, they're okay. But now, watching them back, I'm like, oh yeah, like, even the worst ones are okay, and at least they're trying to do something with the franchise and bring it to modern times, which I think they really accomplished. So, I don't know. If it's me, I think you need to cast a pretty unknown actor. Keep it to just films. They're gonna do a TV show. Like, you can't avoid it at this point. We're gonna get spin-offs. So, a sad day for James Bond and the franchise, but capitalism, baby. All right, let's move into another DC Studios story. Clayface has found its director, with Speak No Evil director James Watkins stepping in. The Hollywood Reporter covered this week that after several months of searching, Speak No Evil helmer James Watkins has been chosen to direct the feature based on the Batman villain, which has a script from horror maestro Mike Flanagan. Some sources say that DC co-chief James Gunn met with Watkins Thursday for a final presentation that led to the nod of nabbing the gig. A deal will now be hammered out. The Batman director Matt Reeves will produce Clayface along with Lynn Harris and DC Studios bosses James Gunn and Peter Safran. The film has a September 11th, 2026 release date. Odd day to release a film. That's still like saying, oh yeah, it comes out on 9/11. That's just yikes. There's yet to be no casting for the film, though Gunn and Safran have said actors who work in animation on DC Studios projects will play the characters in live action. So Alan Tudyk voiced him in Creature Commandos. I could see a world where Alan Tudyk comes into live action. He's a great actor. Steve the Pirate, as we all know. I'm excited for this movie. I know people were kind of mixed on Speak No Evil because the original version was a lot better than the English version. I didn't see it last year because I think it was just like a busy week where there were some big releases. It came out in the fall or December maybe, but I don't know. I'm still optimistic for this. The fact that it's a Mike Flanagan script has me confident, because what's the most important part of a movie? The script. If the script is bad, everything else will fall apart. Even an okay director can make a really great script still work, but a really great director usually can't make a bad script work. So the script is your foundation. I think if people are so happy, and apparently the script is really good, is everyone that's read it has been like, oh yeah, Mike Flanagan wrote such an interesting story, and that's why it was greenlit so fast. So I'm very confident in it. I think the fact that they got a horror director, like a horror thriller director, is a good choice. If they just got like a generic action director, obviously it wouldn't work. You need a horror director, and I like that they're going to lean into different genres and flavors and stuff like that. So I'm optimistic. Maybe that's going to be the Monday announcement for DC Studios. There's lots of possibilities. Is it Sergeant Rock? Is it a first like photo look at Supergirl because they are filming? Is it a first photo look at Lanterns because they are filming as well? Or is it just like a new Superman photo or something like that? I don't know. If there even is a Monday press event. I've seen rumors as well that like, oh, there's nothing on Monday. That was just like Grace Randolph that made that up or something like that. Either way, it is a very exciting time to be a DC Studios fan. Like, there is a lot of stuff in the pipeline that I think is going to be very good and is very promising. Just this week at the Mickey 17 premiere, Robert Pattinson for the first time said he knows what the Batman Part 2's story is, or I think he called it the Batman 2 actually, but he knows what the story is and he is very excited for it. He says it's a really cool story, and he said Matt is a very careful and caring writer. So I'm very optimistic for Superman, very optimistic for Supergirl. I think Lanterns has such good potential. Sergeant Rock, I think that has crazy potential to just let all of these directors do their own thing and don't have a universal look or feel to DC Studios. It's like comic books. You want each story to be unique and its own thing. So I think getting a horror director to do this Clayface film that's a Mike Flanagan script is very strong strong idea. Don't get like, some generic studio director that we can boss around like a John Watts or Russo brothers where it's like, oh no, Kevin Feige is going to tell you what to do the whole time. All right, another piece of news. Angela Bassett, who I absolutely love, think she's a fantastic actress. She reflected on her reaction to losing the Oscar for lead actress in 2023, saying she put in the time and good work. This comes from The Hollywood Reporter. In an interview, the actress said that she found it interesting that she wouldn't be allowed to be disappointed at an outcome where I thought I was deserving. And if you remember that Oscar ceremony, you remember when Jamie Lee Curtis won, she looked very upset. And look, it is a hard thing obviously to cover your face and like look, oh, I have to look so happy. But she said, quote, I love applauding people, but in that moment, and then it's ... because she sort of trailed off and gave a look. She said, no, I have put in the time, put in good work over time. I didn't think that was a gift. I thought it was a given. And look, I totally agree with her sentiment. You should not have to hide the fact that you are disappointed in losing. Like you can be, oh, it's an honor to be nominated and I'm so proud of blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I don't even think she deserved the Oscar, but neither did Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Because she won Best Supporting Actress, Jamie Lee Curtis, for Everything Everywhere All at Once. It should have been Stephanie Sue. What's her name? Stephanie Sue, who played the daughter in Everything Everywhere All at Once. She was my pick that year, and I was very surprised Jamie Lee Curtis won. I was pretty disappointed as well. But I think as good as Angela Bassett was as well, I don't think she deserved it either, but she is totally valid and in the right for being upset about it. Like, I'm just so sick of this, oh, you have to be a gracious, applaud. It's like, no, you're at the biggest award ceremony of most people's careers. Like, getting an Oscar nomination is the biggest thing. Winning the Oscar is the biggest thing in most acting careers that people are blown away by, and that is the thing. Like, Oscar nominated actor, actress. That's crazy. That is how they will introduce you in trailers for the rest of your life and in like every talk show or whatever. So whatever, I'm happy that she just came out and said it. I mean, she's commented on it before in like a Oprah interview, I remember in 2024 last year, saying she was extremely disappointed. So you can be humble while still being disappointed. All right, a final piece of news is a little one. Spider-Man 4 release date has been pushed to late July 2026. Now, at first, I was like, oh my God, what? We're delaying Spider-Man 4, but it's a week delay. So this is like a non-news story. The film's now just hitting theaters 2 weeks after Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey instead of 1 week. So I think it was maybe a move by Tom Holland, because I believe he is a producer on the Spider-Man films now as well. So maybe he was like, hey guys, that Nolan movie that I'm coming out with a week before Spider-Man? Well, if we don't move our Spider-Man movie, we are going to get killed by The Odyssey, or The Odyssey is going to get killed by Spider-Man. Who knows at this point? I think people are losing faith in the MCU. But a 1 week delay is literally a nothing news story. I know people as well online were like, just saw Spider-Man 4 delayed and had a little heart attack like me, like, oh shit, it's not gonna happen, is it? But then it was like 1 week and oh, okay. But I think I'm gonna wrap up the news there. As I said before, timestamps below. We're gonna do non-spoilers first for The Monkey, then get into spoilers. So look at the timestamps if you don't want to know anything, but let's talk The Monkey. The Monkey is a 2025 horror comedy film coming in at an hour and 38 minutes. Nice short watch in the theaters. It is directed and written by Osgood Perkins, sometimes known as Oz Perkins. You may know him from Legally Blonde. You might know him as the director-writer of Longlegs as well, a film I absolutely adored last year and I immediately want to watch again now after having seen this. Had a budget of $10 to $11 million, so that's pretty good. Current reviews are mostly positive, I would say. So it's got 76% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 67% popcornometer, 6.7 on IMDb, 64% on Metacritic, with a 3.1 average rating on Letterboxd, with 3.5 stars, just taking the mode rating. The synopsis for The Monkey: when twin brothers find a mysterious wind-up monkey, a series of outrageous deaths tear their family apart. 25 years later, the monkey begins a new killing spree, forcing the estranged brothers to confront the cursed toy. And the film stars, of course, Theo James as Hal Shelburne / Bill Shelburne, Tatiana Maslany as Lois Shelburne, Christian Convery as young Hal / young Bill, Colin O'Brien as Petey, Adam Scott as Captain Petey Shelburne, Elijah Wood as Ted Hammerman, Rohan Campbell as Ricky / Thrasher, Sarah Levy as Aunt Ida, and Osgood Perkins as Uncle Chip, with a bunch of other fun players that come in and out of the film. But okay, The Monkey. My initial thoughts, look, you know how much I loved Longlegs, as I've said twice now, but I had high expectations going into this based on Longlegs, and this was not great, but it's not bad. I wouldn't say it's a bad movie. I would say it's just very different. There is stuff in here to enjoy, but it's definitely a very flawed film. And I think that maybe comes from the fact that it's based on a short story by Stephen King instead of, I believe, Osgood Perkins just wrote Longlegs, and that's not based on anything, but I might be incorrect about that. But this felt much more like an adaptation versus a quite original story. So not great, but not terrible. But as always, let's start with the performances. I'll start with Theo James as grown-up Hal and Bill. He's pretty okay. I think I'm not the biggest Theo James fan in general. Everything I watch with him, I just don't find him that captivating as a performer. Other than The White Lotus season 2, I think he's, I don't know, kind of under that storyline. I find him much more captivating versus in here, I didn't really care for him, I guess. But Tatiana Maslany as his mother, Lois Shelburne, she's really fun. I like her a lot. Like, I know people, a lot of people don't like She-Hulk, and it was a very stupid and goofy show. I can acknowledge that, but I liked her in She-Hulk. I think she is hilarious. I think she's very funny in this and has some heartfelt stuff in here as well. I like her a lot in everything I've watched her in, so she was fine in this. I actually think she fits Osgood Perkins' kind of vibes very well. Apparently there's a post-credit scene after, but I didn't end up staying for that because the lights came on, and usually that means there's nothing, but that was a teaser for his next film, which will star Tatiana Maslany, so whoops. But she's very good as Lois Shelburne. Then Christian Convery as young Hal / young Bill. I really loved this kid. He was such a good actor in the film, and like, oddly enough, he got me way more emotionally invested in the story than grown-up Hal / Bill, which is, I would say, like the halfway point in the film. Kind of it jumps to 25 years later, but I really liked when it was young Hal and Bill and that young brotherhood that they're exploring when after their dad leaves and they're having family issues. I really liked the two young kids just like kind of growing up together, and they massively hate each other. The kids just play very well. He plays each twin super well. As for Colin O'Brien as Petey, who is Hal's son that he's kind of estranged from, I would say not great, but at the same time, it's not necessarily his performance's fault. He's just not really given any personality. He's just told to be a grumpy teen silhouette, and it's not that interesting. There's not a lot of layers or emotional depth to him. He wants to know about his dad's family tree, but that's about it. That's all we learn about him. Some other fun players in here. Adam Scott as Captain Petey Shelburne. Fun inclusion, but he's only in the first scene, so not much to say about that, but I love Adam Scott. I've been a huge fan of his since Parks and Rec, and of course he's amazing in Severance, which the episode we're going to talk about today and what else I watched, I think was maybe Adam Scott's best performance on Severance so far. Then Elijah Wood as Ted Hammerman. He's given some funny stuff to do. It's a cool inclusion. Rohan Campbell as Ricky. He's pretty funny. Not necessarily like a stoner character, but he's playing a stoner rocker skateboarding type dude, so it's a fun inclusion and it's a comedy. You need some over-the-top goofy guy to have in there. Then as for Sarah Levy as Aunt Ida, she's not given tons to do, but what she is given is very fun and very graphic as well. We'll talk about the kills in this film as well. And then Osgood Perkins as Uncle Chip, the last one I'll mention. He's very funny. We know him more than Ida, I would say, which is odd because Ida has more screen time, and yet I feel like there's one quote from Uncle Chip that I feel like really just summarizes who he is as a person and works really well. But it's a really well assembled cast, maybe misused in a couple of parts, but the story, it's a little thin. Like, I didn't feel like there was that much to dig into or really take apart like Longlegs. Longlegs was a very, to me, complex and emotionally just layered script that had a really fun chase aspect, thriller aspect, versus this film. I do think the comedy kind of distracts from us getting to something a little bit deeper. I read about the short story, and there's a lot that's changed for this film, but it just felt like we were a little thin and stretching the story as far as it could go. And I mean, an hour 38 runtime. I'm not saying a movie or every movie has to be 2 hours plus, but it did feel like, oh, it's over when the movie ended. The story did feel, I don't know, like I was more invested before the time jump. It weirdly felt like the time jump took any of the emotional investment I had away. I really started to care about these two kids and their journeys, and then once it took that 25-year leap, it felt like I sort of lost interest because young Hal and young Bill are just very different, and I liked seeing them in this almost like coming-of-age horror film where their mom's a single parent and she has some hilarious lines, but also she's just trying to do her best, and their dad's left them. Hal is being bullied at school not only by his brother but by a lot of other students, and just has a lot of really really shitty stuff happening to him, and this monkey comes into play, and all of that just worked super well for me, and I loved the first half of the movie. I couldn't tell you exactly where it makes the 25-year jump, but it did feel like a very halfway type thing, so I really loved half of this movie, and tonally, it's of course different from Longlegs. This is a comedy horror film, but going into it, I was like, oh, I love Osgood Perkins from Longlegs, but this feels like a late night horror comedy film from like Adult Swim or something. It's very slapstick, very almost not Family Guy, but like if this is an Adult Swim film, then Longlegs is more of Netflix's Mindhunter or something, or Zodiac even. It's not a bad thing. I like that they're different films. It gives Osgood Perkins something different to do in each of the films, and I think you can enjoy them both as their own thing, and it's got to be fun as a storyteller, as a writer-director, to take on different projects that are very different from each other, but I definitely preferred Longlegs tonally and as a story as a whole, I guess. The kills, of course, you're going to a horror movie, you expect some kills. The kills were so good in this film. Oh my god, that's I think where this movie really gets major credit and major love from me, is the comedy element allows the kills to be outlandish without being distracting, because if you did some of these kills in Longlegs would be a lot worse of a movie, but you could do the kills from Longlegs in this film and I think they would still work, but you can't do the kills from this film in Longlegs and it would work, you know what I mean? But the kills in this are just like stupid, like someone steps in a bucket, runs into a sign, and it's very like cut to funeral, stuff like that. It's just very Looney Tunes almost, I want to say, or like Jackass or Monty Python. It's just very slapstick, and I loved that. Even if it's not a strong story, at least it's funny and the kills are over the top and will give you something to remember at the end of the day. And the movie does lack any subtlety. I don't know if that's a criticism, but because it's a comedy, maybe they're not trying to hide anything, but the movie lacks subtlety. Every joke is super on the nose slapstick. Every kill is as big as it could possibly be. Every reveal is just so melodramatic, and it really uses a lot of organ, like comedy organ type reveals for the score instead of like slow violin, like I remember from Longlegs kind of. So it is very over the top. Even the score is adding a lot onto the comedy, which I enjoyed as well. It's a big change up. I'm not saying it's anything good or bad, better or worse. I'm just saying the movie is not nearly as subtle or can't be read as deeply as Longlegs at all, like I said before. And if it is a horror comedy, you want good kills, but you also want good humor. And it was a little disappointing that in my theater, there were probably 10 to 15 people there. I don't know how many exactly, but I found this movie hilarious. I thought the jokes were really good and just really funny, and it was very much up my stream of humor or my brand of comedy, but I was the only one in my theater laughing. It was so awkward. That there's a few jokes in here that I really love that I'll share with you, but they're not spoilers really. Like there's a sign when they're going to a new town and the town slogan is just birthplace of its locals. No one else in the theater, I think, even looked at that. Then there's another moment where like Hal gets bullied at school, and you would think it's this big group of tough guys bullying him when it's like a group of 5 girls in his grade along with his brother that are bullying him. And I found every scene where he's getting bullied to be like this funny cartoonish bullying that just isn't not realistic. Maybe the humor goes too far in some points. Like there's a pivotal scene in the third act at the end of the movie where they did this joke 3 times, and every time it just felt a little dumber. But I was like, you know what, at least they're really sticking to it. And I kind of admire Osgood Perkins that he very much writes his story, and I think he sort of sticks to what he wants to do. It doesn't feel like there's any studio intervention in these or moments that were cut out. It feels like, yeah, that was a very unique vision. And a lot of criticisms I saw were people saying, I'm not a fan of Osgood Perkins' work, and this was like the pinnacle of his work and just his very much his style. So you can tell he's very much sticking to his voice in these. Maybe the humor goes a little bit far, but also his cameo in the film, because he's playing Uncle Chip. I think he's very funny as Uncle Chip as well. But okay, maybe let's get into some more problems, because I don't think it's necessarily an issue that he's sticking to his style. I actually really appreciate that. I like when directors and writers just stick to what they enjoy. You don't need to cater to studio and the algorithm expectations or whatever, but the movie does lack tension. Like Longlegs, I loved because from the first scene, I was nervous and scared the whole time watching, versus this movie, it feels like it goes a little bit more for cheap jump scares. Unlike Longlegs, where it feels like someone's watching you the whole time and it's much more of a Zodiac serial killer chase, it feels like we kind of know everything throughout the monkey. Like we kind of get it from the first scene, how everything works, how everything's going to play out, or at least that's how it was to me. There was never a moment of revelation or shock to me. It's a little bit of a bummer because it's an hour and 38 minutes of understanding everything where you want some subverted expectations, but I got it. From the start, I got it. If you're someone that likes simple movies and you don't like movies that require a lot of thinking or a lot of, theorizing and ambiguity to them, that's fine. Everyone has their film taste. There's no problem with that. You might like this film for its simplicity. I didn't necessarily hate it because there was a lack of tension and I was sitting there in the theater being like, oh, okay, we're really just kind of sticking and leaning into the comedy aspect, and that's fine. But there is nothing under the surface of this film to try and discover. Like in spoilers, I'm going to try and work out what I think this movie is maybe about, but I think you can kind of gather it from the story at one point, and I won't say who it is as to not spoil. It's sort of revealed that the story is about the big nuclear button and like people in charge of turning the key and finding out who are the people that are willing to do that, who are the people that are willing to take lives for the sake of it or whatever. I don't know, it's an interesting theme to talk about and it was a fun talking point for me in the film, but it doesn't feel like there's much to be explored. It doesn't feel like there is much explored in this film as well, and not just from a thematic point of view, but I also think from a character point of view. There's only really Hal who is explored in this film. Weirdly, as big of a cast as it is, and I listed the cast there, that's a pretty star-studded cast, but weirdly as big of a cast as it is, Elijah Wood has, one scene. He's not in this very much, so it's a big cast that doesn't explore everyone at all, really. I would say Hal and Bill are really the only ones we get to know. Even their mom, we don't know very well, so we never learn anything about everyone, or we never really try and dig in any deeper, so it's a very thin movie, like I said. And even Bill or Hal's son, like I said in talking about Petey and the character and performance breakdown, I don't know, I just wish I learned a little bit more about him. I think the only thing he really has about his personality style is he's doing this family tree. It's not a spoiler to say, but he's doing a family tree project and he just wants to know about his dad, Hal, and Hal hasn't told him anything because Hal only sees him once a year because he's so scared something's going to happen with this monkey. So kind of the setup to the story is he's trying to protect his son during this week that he sees him. But I just wish there was a little bit more of an exploration of the father-son relationship and Hal maybe opening up to him and just like saying things out loud. Just say it to his son and we can maybe have an interesting conversation. And speaking of saying things out loud, there is a use of narration in this film. I think it's only in the first half when it's Theo James narrating the film of his childhood, and I wasn't a big fan of that. It felt like there was a lot of telling and not showing. Everything that was happening visually, I think would have been okay on its own, and you kind of don't need the narration. And it is interesting to be talking about narration, having seen, I think I talked about it with Love Hurts in my review. The use of narration is really painful in that film, and on my socials I promoted, or I kind of posted 3 podcasts that I listen to regularly, and one of them was House of Cinema, and they talked about the narration in Love Hurts in their really funny episode last week. Go check that out, and how painful it was, that it's really trying to hold your hand. And I would argue that this film, that's a similar problem. There's a lot of narration in this film that is kind of just for people that aren't paying attention to the movie fully in the audience at the theater or at home watching it. Maybe that's a studio note, but I think you could have just taken the narration out and the story would be fine. But structurally, the movie is a little bit hazy for me, and it never felt like I knew where we were in the story. There weren't recognizable things as we were moving through, versus once the movie ended and I thought about it, I was like, okay, I can see first act, it's them as kids. Second act, it's Hal going back to his old town. And the third act, I won't say because of spoilers, but it just feels like we're kind of spinning our wheels a few times, which is dangerous in an hour and 38 minute movie. I think you got to keep it focused, and it feels a little bit messy writing wise. And that also reflects in the dialogue. Some of the dialogue in this movie is very awkward and clunky. I don't know how much is taken from the short story, but it did feel a little bit messy at times. Also, there's just a lack of explanation about the monkey, or is it just really simple? I feel like what they say in the trailer about it being a teleporting monkey, or I think in one of the trailers it's like, it's that monkey that ruined our childhood and our dad hated us, it's the killer monkey, or they say something super on the nose and just like simple that I thought would only be in the trailer, but it's kind of just gonna simplify what the monkey is, but there's never a cool deep exploration of what it is. And maybe that was a similar issue I had with Longlegs, that we didn't really explain what the orbs were inside the dolls' heads, like what's up with those, or we didn't really get any fun theories in the film of like Harker talking about it. Same with this film. I don't think there's a lot of explorations of what the monkey actually is. And maybe third acts are where Osgood Perkins struggles as a writer, because I do think the third act of Longlegs is probably the weakest part of the story. I think that's where the movie lost a lot of people. I think the third act is okay of Longlegs, and I still think it's a very good like 4.5 out of 5 movie movie in general because of tone, structure, and just acting performances I think are phenomenal in that movie. But the third act does maybe struggle a little bit. And same with this movie. The third act was very weak in this. I was not invested by the time we got to the third act. As I said, I enjoyed the childhood stuff a lot more, and you really had to work to get back into the emotional investment rhythm with Theo James as Hal and Bill. But let's read 3 Letterboxd reviews before we get into my overall thoughts and spoilers. First one comes with no rating, but there is just a liked from Amanda the Jedi, who said, "We keep seeing horror movies that are like ... so close to being something really special. I wish the tone and plot of this movie lived up to the creativity, fun, and terror of its kills. Still worth the watch, though." Totally agree. I think there's a lot of creative aspects, but the sum of the movie isn't quite worth its parts, or like the whole isn't worth the sum of its parts, whatever that saying is. I think the intricacies and the creativity behind the story don't quite all come together, and I wish, like Amanda, I do wish the whole movie, the tone and plot were as good as the fun and creativity that are going into the kills, because those are really the most creative aspects of the film. Then we have Coffee, who gave it 3.5 stars. Extremely, deeply, unfathomably stupid movie, but in brackets affectionate. Yeah, it's a very dumb comedy movie. It's kind of a complete lean away from Longlegs tonally, like I said, but you can appreciate that in its own way. And finally, Kit Laser, amazing TikToker, podcaster, YouTuber, all that stuff. Love his stuff so much. He gave it 2.5 stars. He said zany, bloody fun, eventually gives way to a, in brackets with a question mark, ironic exploration of the inevitability of death, kind of a film bro Final Destination. I've seen a lot of people comparing this to Final Destination. I've never seen those films, but maybe that'll be my next binge watch, is all the Final Destination films before we get the new one. But look, overall, I think it's not a bad movie, but it obviously wasn't great, and it doesn't quite captivate like Longlegs, but it's a very different project overall, so it's hard to compare apples to oranges. It really goes for a much more goofy slapstick horror film that's like I said, Adult Swim, Family Guy type humor. It's a Stephen King story, of course, and I find every Stephen King story other than The Shining, I would say, usually the endings don't come together fully, but I still somewhat enjoyed this. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, but occasionally I'm kind of floating more towards 3 out of 5 stars. I had fun, but I didn't love it. I actually enjoyed Hard Eyes more, and I think in my rankings on Letterboxd, go check it out. I think this is my 12th movie of the year. Go check out where it's ranking, but I don't know. I think I have to sit on it a little bit longer. I would still recommend seeing it in theaters, but if you are going to see one horror movie in theaters, I would say watch Hard Eyes. But let's get into spoilers. All right, few things I want to work through in spoilers, starting with, I was a little confused in the third act who turned the key before Bill's death, but then I forgot that since Bill tried to force the monkey to drum, it took over, like its own spirit took over its own controls and just started killing people. So I don't know, I felt the action in that moment was a little bit clumsy and it sort of didn't make it fully clear, but I don't know, maybe I was just a little confused after the film and was lost in my disappointment. So it was no one. It's that the monkey is taking over in the end and it starts the apocalypse, which brings me to the horsemen. I was like, who is this gray guy on a horse? Is that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, or horsemen of the apocalypse, depending on the book, I guess? It is. Hal and the horsemen just like nod to each other. I enjoyed that. They're fully in the apocalypse. I thought that was an interesting ending. It's a very Stephen King ending as well. But maybe, I don't know, this is me theorizing, maybe Hal is like a horseman too of the apocalypse because he plays a big role in the monkey continuing to work. He keeps turning the key. As a kid, he turns it, but then he kind of starts its life over again. So I feel like he's the one that's pushing this all forward. I don't know. He plays an important role, but maybe also Bill does because he kills Bill. So maybe he's killed one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because Bill keeps using the doll. I'm trying to make sense of the third act and like who are the 4 horsemen, but we see one horseman and he's very gray. It looks cool. And then I just want to talk about Bill's death as well. I thought that was a part that didn't work for me. It's like this very heavy-handed death where they kind of just say their feelings out loud in a very blunt and not very layered way. All of that felt very clumsy. Like they just all of a sudden forgive each other because Hal's like, well, Bill, you forget, I also lost my mom when you lost yours. And Bill says, wow, I never thought about it that way. And I was like, this dialogue cannot be serious. This has to be a joke. I don't know. I think it's a little bit difficult because the whole movie is really leaning into this slapstick, unserious dialogue. It's leaning leaning into the comedy super hard. And then the third act is in some moments trying to take this really hard turn into an emotional drama, and it wants us to take it seriously, but I can't after all of this slapstick shit for the rest of the movie. So by the time we get to the brothers trying to reconcile, it feels like a big tonal change, and it just doesn't quite come together. It's a movie that's constantly going for big laughs, but then all of a sudden in the last 5 minutes you want me to get dramatic and take you seriously. I can't. I'm sorry. But the dialogue, and this is where specifically I think the dialogue was rough and awkward for me, was when it's trying to get earnest. So I don't know, just tonally I think the movie is, yes, different from Longlegs. I don't know how many times I can say that, but also very confused in of itself. I stick with the slapstick and it's okay. But his brother's death was a little bit goofy, that he hurts his leg when the monkey throws him or whatever. And at the start of the film, in the narration, I thought it was a little bit heavy-handed when he's like, my brother Bill was the type of guy that would go to shake your hand and then fake and say psych and comb his hair or something like that. And his brother does it twice at the end of the film and then finally shakes his hand. That's when I was talking about how committed this film is to being a comedy, and even in the darkest and like most emotional point of the story, there's still this joke that Oz Perkins is committed to doing, and it's the rule of threes in comedy. He does it 2 times, and then the third time he finally shakes his hand. Maybe I didn't love that part, but I was like, you know what? At least he's committing to his script and what he wants to do, so fair enough. But yeah, I do think the third act of Longlegs is the weakest part of the movie by far. We kind of just show up at Bill's house because Ricky or Thrasher, whatever his name is, takes them hostage as a fake cop. It kind of just like falls all into place kind of randomly. There's not a lot of exploration of the town or Hal and Bill running into each other. They only run into each other once as adults, and it's a little, I don't know, they like have so many incidents together as a kid. You need to emotionally invest me a little bit more in their rivalry as adults, but the film never really does that. But going back to some other deaths, actually I do want to mention Uncle Chip's death, because that was probably my favorite death of the film. First of all, his quote that like, oh, we never wanted to have kids because we like living a lifestyle where you can sit down until you want to stand up and not when you have to. But then he undercuts it after with, we're also swingers too. And I just thought Oz Perkins was hilarious in that scene. Sometimes directors put themselves in their own movies and it doesn't quite work, but I thought this worked very well, and he's very funny as Uncle Chip. Plus he kills himself within 2 minutes, and he dies in a hilarious stampede of horses that step on his sleeping bag. That was probably the best effect of the movie, pouring his crushed up guts out of the sleeping bag. Okay, but let's get back into the story. Some themes where I think we maybe could have improved. I'm not a writer, but this is just me. Maybe we could have spent another 10 to 15 minutes with the kids where they're adopted now, because it feels like we do rush past the Aunt Ida, Uncle Chip adoption phase pretty quick. Like they get adopted, Uncle Chip dies, they get sad, and that's when Bill sees the monkey again, and then it just like jumps forward 25 years. And I was like, oh, I kind of wish we could have seen them, I don't know, as adopted, and them pulling further and further apart after they've gone through this traumatic experience. Or like I said, spend another 10 to 15 minutes of them having this rivalry as adults, because it's very clear in the movie Bill is the villain when they grow up. Like I don't know Hal wouldn't put that together. He keeps calling him, and there's this big revelation like, oh, Bill was behind it all. It's the most obvious thing. He is clearly an evil dude. I don't know how Hal wouldn't catch on to that. Like, you know your brother. You know he's a terrible person. He bullied you as a child. Obviously he's behind this all and getting the monkey back. It just didn't really make a lot of sense. I think I would want, you know, not just this montage of Bill being shown as the villain. Maybe get Hal and Bill running into each other a few more times, or having these battles with the monkey or something like that. I think I would have preferred, or another 10 to 15 minutes. Like, you're only at an hour and 38 minutes right now. You could add another 10 minutes of them as kids after they're adopted, or maybe you add some more time into like what the actual mechanics of the monkey are. Although I don't necessarily have an issue with horror movies not exploring the mechanics of the supernatural. Like, that's mostly okay to me. Like, if I recall correctly in my Longlegs review, I said I wish we talked about the orb a little bit more. Maybe, but at the same point, I don't know. Magic monkey, this is a lot more of a simple concept. There's this magic teleporting monkey that can just kill people. It regenerates. It can move around by itself, and it's like fully in control of who dies and stuff like that. And Adam Scott's character, who shows up for the first 5 minutes, gets someone killed, and then you never see him again, which was a fun inclusion. I don't know. That's fine with me. You don't really have to explain the monkey. It would have been interesting, but at the same time, you don't want to exposition dump, because that's a dangerous thing as well. So what is the monkey about? Is it a story about guilt? Because Hal does feel terrible for his mother's death, because yes, he wants to kill his brother as a child, so he turns the key and it ends up killing his mother. So, maybe that was karma, but he seems to be blaming the rest of the deaths on himself in a way. I do feel like he's kind of taking on all of this guilt from the town deaths when he's an adult. I did pick up from his character that because he turned the key the first time, he's sort of blaming himself for every subsequent turn of the key, which I don't think it's his fault. I think it's just the guilt of people dying in our lives. Sometimes people die prematurely and we blame ourselves, or we think about our last conversation with them and we think, oh, if only I had said that, or there was so much I wish to say, or it was my fault that I didn't help them, or I could have helped them, when, death is premature. And maybe this movie is just about, like Kit Laser said in his Letterboxd review, maybe it is just about the inevitability of death. I also said maybe it's about the randomness and the suddenness of death. The fact that this monkey is literally randomly choosing who's going to die in every situation. So this is just about life and the universe picking the randomness of death. And like the end of the movie with the apocalypse of all this random stuff happening to people, it's literally a manifestation of the randomness of death and how it shapes our lives, and the suddenness, because all the deaths in this movie are just so sudden. No one's like dying of an illness over time. It's like they step on a thing, or their brain explodes, or they blow up by jumping in a pool, which, oh my god. Okay, actually, I said Uncle Chip's death was my favorite, but I think it's actually the pool lady, which is in the trailer. She jumps into an electrified pool and just evaporates. It's insane. One of the most hilarious effects in the film. But I don't know. But ultimately, it's a film about guilt in my eyes. But I think that's going to do it for the spoiler section. I don't really have much else. I think, like I said in the non-spoiler section, it's a very thin script that there's not tons to pick apart. Like, they've started the apocalypse at the end, so it's quite random, all of it. And by forcing death, you bring the end of the world. But let's move into what else I watched. All right, what else I watched? So I got 5 movies, 5 TV shows, and 1 book to talk about. Let's start with the comic book. Our final Superman Batman story, Finest Worlds, pretty good. I actually really enjoyed it. It starts with like this Thomas Wayne Jor-El crossover story where Jor-El sent a piece of Krypton, or I'm not sure if it is when Clark Kent reached Earth, that Thomas Wayne found part of it, touched it, and then it transformed his consciousness, or it teleported it to Krypton where he meets Jor-El. It's just really interesting how they talk about science. It just really bonded Superman and Batman more as brothers and friends than like just working together in the Justice League. And it also just shows interesting parallels between Jor-El and Thomas Wayne, that they were both men that were trying to save a city or a planet, but people didn't listen to them and they were killed. The second story in that book is Little Leaguers, which is about the like cartoon version, or the cartoon little children's comic book version of the Justice League, get teleported to another dimension and are fighting alongside the fully grown like adult version of the comic books. It was okay, but like I said in my review on social media, I got tired of it pretty quickly. I was like, I don't really care. There's not that much going on here. But then we get into a really cool story called Super Bat, where Superman loses his powers to Batman and Batman takes on all of Superman's powers. So Bruce just starts going nuts. Batman can fly, he has laser vision, all this stuff, but he just starts using it to stay up 24/7 and solve every crime on Earth. But then he's crazy, and it's just so fun seeing the Justice League try to talk to him and tell him to calm down and be like, this isn't you need to learn. But Finest Worlds was a really great book to end that series on. I only have 6 of the 9 books from Superman Batman, that particular Superman Batman run, so I think I'm definitely going to look at getting the omnibus. I think there's 2 of them. Next week I'm going to be reading Captain America Winter Soldier, the comic. I don't think maybe I have read it once, but I don't remember. But let's get into TV shows next. All right, well, Survivor is returning this week, and we are slowly working our way through Survivor Season 1. We watched episode 2, where BB, the old guy, went home because everyone was just getting tired of his shit, and he was telling everyone they're lazy, but it's been slow go. We are usually pretty good at binge watching Survivor, but we've just been watching a lot of movies instead. I don't know what it is, but I think we were a little bit Survivored out, and we need the new season to spark our passion again. So I don't know. Season 1's fun because of how informal it is, but we're not totally hooked on it yet. Then The White Lotus started last Sunday. Season 3 is back. They're in Thailand. What a cast. Oh my god. The amount of hatred I have for Patrick Schwarzenegger's character. I want to punch him in the face so much. I hate everything about him. The cast overall is just amazing. Every family, every dynamic. I love it so much. It's 1 episode in and I'm just addicted. So I'm very much looking forward to watching that week to week. Then I finally, over 3 days, I watched the SNL 50th anniversary show. It was okay. They did a lot of sketches that they've just already brought back in the last year. And they did Domingo sketch again. They've done that like 5 times now, and it's just so tiring. You're milking it for the 50th anniversary show when you just did it this season twice, and you did it at a Sabrina Carpenter concert. But they did do a really funny segment where they showed all of the poorly aged things that they've done. They did, instead of an actual in memoriam, they did an in memoriam for all of the cancelable sketches. And holy shit, there's some really, really bad ones in there, but it was still a very funny segment. And it's, I don't know, it was kind of smart of them, and it was kind of refreshing for them to own up to all the terribly aged things that they've done. They also, of course, did the Alien Station one with Kate McKinnon coming back again. I feel like we just did that last year as well. So I don't know. It was a mix of very funny things, like the New York musical that John Mulaney did was really funny, but I feel like he did something similar when he hosted. So it was a lot of repeat sketches. I understand that's what the show is going to be, but there were just a lot of things that they've done recently. So overall, I would give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. It was mostly funny, but I was a little bit disappointed. Then we finished Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man with episode 9, Hero or Menace, and episode 10, If This Be My Destiny. Absolutely crazy good show. I think I'm just going to rewatch it this week. It's maybe one of the best Spider-Man property things we've ever had. Just the storylines they're doing, the characters they're reinventing in really fun ways are all just really refreshing. It doesn't feel like a tiring reboot that it's like, okay, we're just going to do that again. And it's like moving parts of the classic Spider-Man lore into new characters, and it's also doing things that we haven't seen in live action or cartoons that much. So I don't know, Marvel animation is kind of really good with X-Men 97 and Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I think they could focus on just animation for a while and they would be okay. All right, final TV show, Severance, season 2, episode 6. If you don't want to know anything for Severance, skip ahead like 2 minutes. But episode 6, Attila, Irving B. going for dinner with Bert and his husband, who I think his husband is the one that we saw whistling in that department when he's moving the paintings around. I think Fields works there as well. But the fact that Bert was recruited by Lumen through the church and the Severance program through the church is interesting. I think this whole appeal that you can redeem people's souls by giving them or getting them into the Severed program is very interesting. Probably Adam Scott's best episode acting wise. Like, I was just blown away by all of the reintegration stuff, but also his Chinese food dinner where he runs into Helena. I thought that scene worked really well. All the intimacy that he has with Helly inside the office was pretty crazy. Very horny episode. But again, Severance week to week is the best show. You should be watching it right now. But let's move into movies. Okay, first movie, The Order. Came out last year. It was only available in the United States since like December 9th, and it was very exclusive. Finally dropped on Amazon Prime everywhere. Starring Jude Law, Nicholas Hoult, and my dear God, it was really good. It's a gorgeously shot film, first of all, but it is so well acted. Like, Ty Sheridan is really good in it as this younger cop that's working with FBI agent Jude Law, but it's just also a very scary story about neo-Nazis and fascism in the US, but it's such a good action and suspense film that I liked a lot. It just felt like a lot of blending of different movies that I've enjoyed, like even a little bit of like Black Klansman in there, or I don't know, a lot of classic chase movies, maybe Sicario. It was a lot of fun, and I think I said in December how excited I was to watch it, but it was only available in the US, and I was just waiting for it to drop in Canada, and it finally did. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I would absolutely recommend checking it out on Amazon Prime. It's like an hour and 56 minutes, so it's a pretty brief watch, but it is very entertaining, and Jude Law is so good. Nicholas Hoult, so good. Ty Sheridan, so good. Just a very fascinating part of history. Then we started another franchise, my girlfriend and I. I did not grow up a Pirates of the Caribbean fan. I remember seeing the second one at the drive-in movie theater when I was 6 years old, and I'm pretty sure I fell asleep halfway through because it was the second movie of the night after Back in the Barnyard. So I was tired. I was a 6-year-old. You can't get mad at me over that. But we watched Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. I really enjoyed the first one. I thought it was like pretty fun. It's a good action adventure film. It's got fun hijinks and goofy jokes and some funny stuff. I know that's a beloved film, and I gave it 4 stars because I enjoyed it. I'm just not huge on the Disney pirate stuff. And then Dead Man's Chest, the sequel, I just want to say outright, the CGI is still very good in a lot of moments, but there are other times where you can clearly see like the divide between the digital and the real person. But still, like Davy Jones or whatever, everyone just looks looks amazing. All the character designs are so good in that film. Really enjoyed it. Even the CGI in the first one isn't terrible, but the second one in particular, I know it's posted on Twitter every 2 days like, oh, we don't get CGI like this anymore. And it's like, we do in a lot of movies, actually. It reminded me, the CGI in Dead Man's Chest reminded me a lot of the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad, with kind of tentacle-y stuff with like Starro. But having aged, oh my God, next year it's 20 years old, Dead Man's Chest. So there are moments, but definitely that CGI was ahead of its time. Then, if you follow me on social media, you know I watched The Gorge, the newest Apple TV movie starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. Look, bear with me, I liked half of it because that first half of The Gorge is so much fun. It's so cheesy. They're playing the Ramones and playing chess and drums, doing all the, Queen's Gambit Whiplash references and stuff like that, but it's just like such a corny YA romance novel come to life that you just don't see a lot in a lot of movies. And it was just so much fun, and I really liked also the introduction of the characters, with her doing the sniping stuff at the airport and him just kind of doing nothing with his life, I guess. It's just a really good introduction, but then the second half, The Gorge, just completely takes over and bulldozes our romance story, and also it does lean very hard into, oh no, Anya Taylor-Joy's in trouble and he has to save her, and it gets very repetitive for the last hour. So, sorry, I'll go back over my Letterboxd ratings. The Order, 4 stars. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, 4 stars. The Gorge, I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars, and then Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, I gave 3.5 stars. But the final movie I watched this week, Uncut Gems. That movie still is so good. I know it's only like 6 years old now, but my dear God, I can remember we were approaching COVID times actually when Uncut Gems came out. I think I watched it January 2020 or February 2020, and one of the most nervous movie experiences of my life. And even watching it the second time, knowing everything that happens in the movie, I was exhausted after I watched it. Adam Sandler, the fact he didn't get an Oscar nomination is just robbery, and I miss the Safdie brothers directing together. I meant to Google why they're not directing together. I feel like it was just that they wanted to do their own thing. It wasn't any like big breakup or big brother fight or something like that. But Uncut Gems, if you haven't seen it, if you've seen Good Time but not Uncut Gems, you gotta check out Uncut Gems because it is just as good, even if I prefer Good Time, I think. And as a matter of fact, I think that's going to do it for episode 58, The Monkey. What a ride it's been. Not great, but not bad. I think it was a very middle-of-the-road film that I would watch again, but I would love to hear from you guys what you thought of it. As always, please rate and review the show 5 stars on all of your streaming platforms, wherever you get your good podcasts like Watcher of All Things, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Acast. We are, of course, an Acast-produced show. Give us 5 stars, share it with a friend, recommend it to someone. You can comment actually right underneath the show on Spotify, which is a cool feature, or you can drop a review underneath. If you were on the YouTube channel, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment underneath. What did you think of The Monkey? Did you like it more than Longlegs? Did you like it less than Longlegs? Are you not a fan of Oz Perkins movies in general? Let me know. And stay tuned for my YouTube video, my 2025 Oscar hopes and predictions. You can also email the show if you want to get in touch with us, watcherofallthings@gmail.com, or find me on social media on Instagram and Threads. I am at Watcher of All Things, and then on the TikTok account I am at watcher.of.all.things. Follow me on all of those. There's tons of videos every day. I post something on all my social medias, so lots of good content for you to enjoy there. You can also find my personal Letterboxd account, KikiJ70. That's KIKIJ70. Follow me on there. Drop a comment on one of my reviews that you found me through the show, and I will follow you back. Let's build a little community. Next week we got a few options. I'm thinking maybe Last Breath, that Woody Harrelson, Simu Liu film about the diver that has like 90 minutes or whatever. Or Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, maybe. Or I was thinking maybe we do a Watcher Watch Back ahead of Mickey 17 on Parasite and Snowpiercer, or we do Okja and Snowpiercer, the 2 Bong Joon-ho English films that we could do as a combination. I don't know. I'd love to hear from you guys. What would you like next week? I'm very open for it. I'm leaning towards the Watcher Watch Back, but that is going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for listening. Rate, review, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on all the socials linked underneath. Stay safe, stay warm, and I will see you in the next one.